One more news item. This is part of our series on how pseudoscience or superstition kills, and this is an incredibly, upsetting and sad story, as they all are. This one coming from Nigeria.
Heartbreaking. What's happening in Nigeria and what happens in a lot of African countries is that children are being driven out of their homes or outright murdered and being accused of being witches or devils or what have you by local religious, mostly Christian, insane people.
Well, they're priests. But the local sect is like this combination of Christianity and traditional superstitions or traditional beliefs, including witches. So it's basically, it's in that way, it's very similar to a lot of the like Caribbean voodoo cults, where it's amalgamation of Christianity and the traditional local belief systems or legends.
There's an extra level of nefariousness to it in that these local religious leaders charge these families months' worth of their wages. I mean, they live on a few dollars a month, and they save up months worth of money and they give it to these religious leaders. They then come over and perform their exorcism to try to ward out the demons from the child, and then when it's determined that they can't do it, then the children are either killed or tortured or released into the streets. And it really is just about as tragic a story as you can possibly read.
You said it was happening in many countries, but are you sure it's not just confined to, for the most part, to Nigeria?
No,
I hadn't heard of any other cases.
I read about Angola, and I also read about Niger, and I read about the Congo. So it seems to be, and these are stories actually that go back many years. There have been many reports of these. They said it's been on the rise for the last decade, basically.
What's interesting is that the parallels with the medieval witch hunts, and that these children are being accused of witchcraft. Mm-hmm. When anything bad happens, someone gets sick and dies or whatever, anything bad happens, then the local priest says, oh, that's because the child is practicing witchcraft. They've been possessed by a demon, now they're going to cast spells and they can contaminate others. And this has become an industry in a very much a similar way that the witch hunters were in medieval times, in the medieval witch hunts in Europe. They charge for the exorcism, and then they're making quite a lucrative living off of it. They're living in large homes, driving around in expensive cars. They're living high off the hog, essentially scaring the locals into giving them, as you say, many months, sometimes up to a year's worth of their salary. And then, think of how heartless you have to be making money off of the suffering of little children. The stories here, to me, they're almost unbelievable, where you have a parent kicking a 5-year-old girl out into the street to fend for herself. To me, that is unimaginable. And it's hard for me to get into the mind of somebody who could possibly do that. Either they simply do not have the bond with their child that, say, I have with mine, or that their fear and superstition is so overwhelming that they just must be insane or beside themselves that they could possibly do that. It's hard for me.
There's one paragraph in here that I have to read this paragraph from the article because it just sums up the whole thing. It says, during the deliverance ceremonies, the children are shaken violently, dragged around the room, and have potions poured into their eyes. The children look terrified. The parents look on, praying that the child will be cleansed. If the ritual fails, they know their children will have to be sent away or killed. Many are held in churches, often on chains, and deprived of food until they confess to being a witch.
Holy
How about
crap.
that?
It's medieval.
It's even worse than what was happening in medieval Europe.
It really is. Yeah.
And it's the other parallel is that they're going after a vulnerable population. Again, in medieval Europe, it was women, and now it's children, which are even more vulnerable. It's just unbelievably barbaric.
It's not isolated incidents either. It really is. It's thousands of children that have suffered. due to this. And the more attention it gets in other parts of the world, certainly, I guess the better, if there's anything better to come out of this. But really, it's almost sickening to have to read this.
Yeah.
That's the new winner for the most heinous manifestation of paranormal belief. I mean, what the hell's worse than that?
We get emails from people quite often where they'll say, well, what's the harm in somebody believing in this if it makes them happy or whatever? And these are the things that this is the answer. This is what the problem is because sometimes small, silly beliefs turn into big, dangerous beliefs. And this is a prime example of something that's gone just so far out of control, and it's so unbelievably abusive that you can't make an excuse for it. You can't just say, yeah, okay, well this is their religion, or this is
No, it's just evil. Now we're just into evil territory.